Welcome to the Security Nexus Deep Dive. In this explainer, we're tackling a massive puzzle in modern conflict: how a state can possibly govern a proxy force when it can't actually give them direct orders. I mean, really think about that question. It gets right to the heart of the paradox of proxy warfare, doesn't it? On one hand, a state sponsor absolutely has to steer its proxy to get what it wants strategically. But on the other hand, it has to maintain plausible deniability, that all-important ability to say, hey, that wasn't us. It is a constant, incredibly high-stakes balancing act between control and concealment.
And we're going to be digging into some fantastic research on this today. For more analysis like this, you should definitely visit us at thesecuritynexus.net.
The Security Nexus is a Maryland-based national security consultancy, and their whole mission is about providing clear, accessible knowledge on really complex topics like hybrid warfare and security policy. The goal is to inform, educate, and empower everyone from professionals to the public.
Okay, so let's jump right in and frame this strategic problem. We're calling it the deniability paradox. At its core, a proxy war is, well, an indirect conflict. It's this triadic relationship, right? You've got the benefactor, the patron state footing the bill. You have the proxy, the armed group doing the fighting, and then you have the target, their common enemy. It's this three-way dynamic that really defines the entire landscape. And that landscape, it immediately presents the central challenge for any state sponsor: a fundamental problem of control. Now, what's really useful here is a framework from Kai M. Thaler, which shows this is really a spectrum. It's not a one-size-fits-all kind of thing. On one end, you have delegation, super tight control, the proxy is doing exactly what the state wants. On the complete opposite end, you have autonomy, where the group is basically its own boss. The reality is, most proxy relationships live somewhere in that messy, gray area in between, and they're constantly shifting. And scholars like Philip Brazier analyze this whole dynamic through the lens of something called the principal-agent problem. Just think of the state as the principal, the boss, and the proxy as its agent. The core challenge is that the agent might just develop its own interests, its own agenda that doesn't perfectly line up with the boss's. And that gap, right there between their goals, that's where control starts to completely fall apart. So, if you can't just bark out orders, how do you steer your agent? Well, here's a helpful way to visualize it. Think of it like a dashboard with 4 key levers of influence. Just imagine a state sponsor sitting in front of this dashboard. You've got 4 levers you can pull to try and influence your proxy. And you've also got this big risk meter. And that needle starts creeping into the red every time the proxy goes off script, or every time the sponsor's fingerprints become a little too obvious. This is not a perfect science. It's all about managing a really complex, often unstable relationship. Okay, lever number 1, the most obvious one: sustainment. This is the flow of cash, weapons, all the essential supplies. It's powerful because it creates dependency. The proxy literally can't fight without the patron's help. But it has a huge failure mode: diversion. As researchers like Shabnam Dadparvar and Amin Parto have pointed out, those weapons and that cash can, and often do, end up on the black market, or even worse, in the hands of factions you never ever wanted to support. And this isn't just a theory. We have a crystal clear example of this lever failing spectacularly. In his analysis of Operation Cyclone in Afghanistan back in the 80s, Philip Brazica notes that the CIA was relying on Pakistan to arm the Mujahideen. The result? As little as 30% of the supplies actually made it to the intended fighters. The rest was just siphoned off or sent to radical warlords that Pakistan favored, not the US. Lever number 2 is intelligence and targeting. So by feeding your proxies crucial data, you can guide them to hit the targets that actually serve your bigger strategic goals. But the failure mode here is a scary one: overreach. The proxy, now empowered with your high-value intelligence, might just decide to attack targets that you consider completely off-limits, which could trigger a dangerous, totally unintended escalation. Third, we've got logistics and sanctuary. This is all about giving the proxy a safe place to train, to regroup, and to operate from. It's a really powerful tool for control. But the risk is what scholars call agency slack. Basically, with a secure home base, the proxy might just go into business for itself, focusing on its own local power grabs and completely ignoring the patron's original objectives. And our final lever is narrative discipline. This one is all about controlling the story. The patron wants the conflict framed in a way that looks legitimate and serves its own interests. The failure mode here is narrative blowback, and this is a big one. It's what happens when the proxy's extreme ideology or, say, their brutal actions become public, and they end up discrediting the patron by association, turning a deniable operation into an absolute PR nightmare. So what happens when these levers fail and that risk meter on our dashboard starts flashing red? Well, this is when control truly and utterly breaks down. Citing some earlier research, Bryachka lays out 3 huge warning signs that you're losing control. First, the proxy starts publicly criticizing your policies. That's a bad sign. Second, they start refusing or, and I love this phrase, creatively interpreting your operational guidance. And the final undeniable red line, they flat out reject peace talks or ceasefires that you, the sponsor, have endorsed. And this all boils down to a fundamental trade-off, which researchers like Mohammed Wasim have explored. The more you tighten your control by, say, sending in advisors or sharing sensitive intel, the more your plausible deniability just decays. It evaporates. Every single visible act of support increases what we call attribution, and that just raises the risk that your enemy can prove you were involved and retaliate directly against you. Now, this is where escalation management comes in. Patrons are not helpless. They have tools to punish a proxy that goes rogue. Conditionality is key. You make all your support dependent on them actually complying. Some patrons get really clever and use capability fuses, providing weapons that need their assistance to even work. And most importantly, they need credible off-ramps, the demonstrated willingness to just cut the proxy loose entirely if they don't play ball. The work of authors like Bryce T. Lee, Juan Pablo Sims, and Kotchafop Korn-Petcherat really explores these different dimensions of state influence. Okay, we have covered a ton of ground here. Let's try to distill all of this down to 3 key takeaways. First, always remember the governor's dilemma. You have to make your proxy competent enough to win, but not so independent that they can just ignore you. Second, influence is not command. It's all managed indirectly through those 4 levers: sustainment, intel, sanctuary, and narrative. And third, and this is so important, control is fragile. Every single one of those levers can break. And with each failure, that priceless asset of plausible deniability just erodes away. Which really leaves us with a final, pretty heavy question. In the long run, when you factor in the blowback, the risk of escalation, and the loss of control, what is the ultimate price a nation really pays for plausible deniability? To continue the deep dive into this and other critical security topics, make sure you visit thesecuritynexus.net. You know, this explainer was informed by the absolutely vital research of the scholars you see on screen here. Their work is what gives us the tools to really grasp these incredibly complex security challenges. Thanks for watching.